So let's look at creating a class. When we're creating code, what we do is that we divide it into different pieces, and each one of these pieces has a unique purpose, so that when we're debugging the program, it makes it much easier to work on just one piece at a time when we're creating or debugging a program. So in this case, let's look at this example. So we've got a class named letter demo right here, and it instantiates objects of two classes named letter and certified letter, and that demonstrates all of their methods. Okay. The classes are used by a company to keep track of letters they mail to clients. The letter class includes auto-implemented properties for the name and for the date. Okay, let's do that first. So, easier for me to work in Visual Studio. So I'm just going to copy this over to Visual Studio, and just a minute, I'm going to pause and go pop this into Visual Studio. Well, easier for me just to do this from scratch. So namespace. And then inside of my namespace, I will have two classes. The first class by default. Now, in Visual Studio, what I did is I just made a new console application. So when I created this, it by default created a class called program. I'm going to right click and rename this, and I will call it letter demo. Okay, so that's my class. I'll put a console read line in there, and what I should do is put in just a test to see if everything works okay. Okay, I'm gonna go run this real quick just to make sure everything's all set up and ready to go. Debug, start debugging. Okay, so everything's working okay. Close that out. And now what I'm going to do is that, and it's important on where you place this, but you notice that I'm going to collapse this method right here, that you'll see inside of this namespace I've got this one class, and inside of this I have one method, and that's the main method. That's the starting point of this. So expand that back out. What I'm going to do is that below this class, here's the beginning and the end of this class, I'm going to put in another class. So I'm going to go grab the code for that and put that in here. Okay, so here's my very simple class. Still inside of that namespace. If I hover over that, you'll see that that's my, you probably can't see that, but it says my namespace and the name of my namespace. So I've got my class, and here I've got, and let me show you how I did these. There's a shortcut you can use in Visual Studio. I'll leave that alone. And that what I'm making is a property, and a property is kind of a variable. We'll see how it works here. It's a variable where you can get the information from this variable or set the information of this variable. Let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do this. There's a little shortcut I can use, property, tab, and it gives me a property. First one I want to do, it says what kind of property is this going to be? Integer? No, it's going to be a string. And then what's the name of it? And the first one is going to be name. Now a property by convention is usually starts with an uppercase letter as opposed to variables. And what we can do is that we can get whatever value the name has been set to, or we can set the name or assign something to the name. So we can do either one of those using this property. So there's the first one and how I made the first one. I'll go ahead and show you again on the second one. The second one was a string, which is the date. So pretty easy to do. Getters and setters for name and date. Okay. Also in here, I've got a method called toString. And what I can do with that, there's already by default from the big object in the sky, there's already a toString method whenever you start making your program. But what I can do is that's a really simple toString method. What I can do is that I can kind of enhance it or make it a little bit better for my purposes. So I've got a toString method, and when I use this, what it's going to return is the type, and then a literal string, and then the value for the name, and then this literal string and the value for the date. Okay, so that's what it's going to return when I use this. Okay, so that's the and they wanted a second class called certified letter. And here's a really handy thing to do is that I can use inheritance. And let me show you that. So here I create a class called certified letter, and in this case what I do is that I say inherit everything from the class called letter. So now everything that's in this class I have access to. So in certified letter, I can access all of this stuff in letter plus another method, or not method, but property called tracking number. So I have letter, and I have the stuff that I added to certified letter that's available in certified letter. So now that we have these, let's go try them out. So I've got these two classes, and again, they are separate. All these classes are separate from each other. And let me collapse these down so you can see that. So here are these three classes inside of this namespace. Okay, so let's go back to the driver, which is the first one, and let's actually start using some of these classes. And here's my examples. Okay, so I'm going to create an object. It wants two different objects, so I'm going to create an object called letter1. And what letter1 is that it's in essence taking everything from letter. Here's our letter class down here. And it's calling upon the constructor for letter. Now, what's the constructor? Well, I didn't really show it here, but by default, there's kind of an entry point to this letter where everything starts at. But it's usually where you define your variables and set values, and it's not really a constructor at all. What it does is it just assigns beginning values to variables and things like that. If you're not going to do that, you really don't need to put it in there, but it's there by default. So that's what this saying here is. Go ahead and create a new letter object called letter1. And here it's saying create a new certified letter object called letter2. Okay, so once I've done that, now I have access to all of those things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the property called name. Now if I look down here, there's this property called name, and what I can do is that I can set the value. Same thing with date. I can set the date. Now on letter number 2, on letter 2, this object, the one that uses certified letter, you remember that in certified letter I have access to everything that's in the letter class. So I can assign the date and I can assign a name, but I can also assign a tracking number. So down in certified letter, I have access to all those, so I can use name, date, and tracking number. So I can use all those. And so now that I'm going to do this, what I can do is that I can write this line to the console, which is letter 1. Now that I've assigned those values, what I can do is that I can get those values and display them. So let's do just my letter 1 object first. So debug, start debugging. That it did what it was told to do. Whoops, let me get that back in there. And here's what it told it to do. Now, the type letter is from the namespace test delete me, and the name electric company, and the date is 02/14/18. Okay, which is what we have here. Okay, now you probably need to track this out inside of here. Let me get rid of this, the get type to, and just have I guess I should stop this from running. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this part right here and just have it say 2 and then the name and the date. Okay, let's go back here. So now I'm going to undo this one, uncomment this one. Now letter 2, remember that came from certified letter, and the name of this object is letter 2. And when I run this one, it should pull up this name, date, and also tracking number. So on letter 2, I'm going to call this toString, which will pull up the name and date, and then also the tracking number. So it'll pull up that property. Okay, so now debug, start debugging, and see if it pulls both of those up. Okay, so it pulled both of those up. What you need to do is to literally use your finger to track through this and see what is executing as this program goes along. You can throw a breakpoint in here, and go through and debug and step into or step over this and trace through what's going on as it runs through this program. Okay. And once you do this, you need to do it over and over and over again until you finally get used to the concepts that are going on. Okay, I'm going to leave it there.